Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust for April the 16th will be in order. The first matter on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the April the 2nd meeting.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of April the 2nd. Are there items to be considered separately? Questions? Hearing none, voting please. The minutes are approved. Next item is item 3, the consent docket. There's a number of items on the consent docket.
Move the consent docket subject to individual consideration.
Second.
A motion and a second on the consent docket. Are there items to be considered separately on the consent docket? Hearing none, voting please. Consent docket's approved. Next item 4, which is the concurrence docket. There's one item on the concurrence docket.
Second.
Have a motion and a second on the concurrence docket. Is there discussion? Hearing none, voting please. Concurrence docket's approved.
Mr. Chairman, I'm so sorry. We have an item on the concurrence docket that had, pardon?
It was the consent docket.
On the consent docket, item W had it.
And it needed to be stricken. It had an incorrect project number listed and an incorrect funding source. And staff notified us earlier today, so it was at the last minute.
If we could beg your indulgence to reconsider the consent docket to strike item W.
I would ask we reconsider item W.
Have a motion and a second to reconsider item W.
It's X, item X, sorry.
I'm sorry. I would move that we reconsider item X.
W and X or just X?
X.
X1 and 2.
X1 and 2.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to reconsider item X, 1 and 2 under the consent docket. Voting, please.
I would move we strike item X1 and 2.
Motion and a second to strike item 3X, 1 and 2. Voting, please. It is stricken. We've done the concurrence docket. We're on to the items for individual consideration. The first item on the agenda is the presentation relocation concerning the Quail Ridge Sporting Clays proposal.
Mr. Chairman, Trust Specialist Lisa Hubble is going to summarize the work that's been done on the Sporting Clays agreement. She's assisted by Karen Giddings.
Good morning, Chairman and trustees. Last November, you all adopted a resolution directing the general manager to resolve the relocation issue for Quail Ridge Sporting Clays. As you recall, back in February 2012, there was a community meeting, and the residents at the current location, nearby at the current location, protested to the noise, and so we started an effort at that time to relocate the facility to a new site. The item has been on your agenda since February 5th, so it's been deferred. In January, the Planning Commission recommended to move the special use permit forward to City Council, and it's been deferred on the City Council agenda coinciding with the AQUID until the trustees had a chance to consider the lease agreement. Okay, so since November, since the directive when we started seriously locating sites, we identified 7 possible sites where the facility could be relocated. 4 sites were eliminated due to the FAA surface restriction area, which means that there can be no shots fired within the first 500 feet from the ground up. And so that automatically eliminated 4 of those sites. 2 of the sites that are on the north part of the map right there, they actually are located in flight patterns for both the hospital and Tinker. And so those sites were eliminated, which left actually only one possible site for relocation, which happened to be outside that FAA surface restriction area. So that is the site that we have focused on. Part of the reason that this site was attractive was because the majority of the land was a vacant lease. There were 2 residences on the location, and the leases were expiring at the end of December, so Aqua chose not to renew those agreements. So that left the site vacant as far as a lease was concerned. The site is comprised of approximately 160 acres. Because there are 2 existing structures on the location, it made it ideal because they can be rehabilitated for an office or storage area for the facility. There were existing utilities at the site. There's a septic tank, water well, electricity. Originally, this site was a development, residential housing development before the Municipal Facilities Authority purchased it. So there were existing roadways in there that have gravel on them, so it made it ideal for our lessee to build his courses around those already semi-improved roadways. Another attractive aspect of this location was it's actually outside the take area for the future reservoir. As you can see there, we have an overlay of the future reservoir, and most of that site is land. And it's centrally located within the West Elm Creek Reservation. Another idea for relocation to this area was because of the central location. It was close to other recreational areas within the West Elm Creek Reservation. It's approximately a half mile from the Kitchen Lake Park. It's close to the off-road vehicle area. It's also in proximity to the Baxter Flying Fields, the marina, there's horseback riding, and it's in the vicinity of the Oklahoma City Police Department firing range. Next slide. All right, another reason for this site was because of lower population densities. At the current location, there are approximately 8 households within a half mile of the facility, and 95 households rooftops within a mile. And then within a mile and a half of the current location, there's 235 rooftops. At the proposed location, there's only actually 1 rooftop within a half mile. There's 6 rooftops within a mile and 87 within a mile and a half of the location. Now compare that to the Oklahoma City firing range. There's approximately 1,537 rooftops within a mile and a half of that facility, just so you kind of have an idea of the proximity. Next slide. Since November, Mr. Martin from Quail Ridge, he held 2 community meetings, one on January 3rd and one on January 22nd. Staff attended both of those meetings. We also attended the Planning Commission meeting, and then there was an impromptu meeting on January 15th after the AQUIT meeting here at City Hall. Mainly the 3 major concerns that were raised by citizens were noise, lead contamination, possible lead contamination, and the impact to wildlife. Next slide. So what staff did is we authorized a community noise survey, and we retained the same firm that we utilized for the current location, which was Marshall Environmental. And the noise survey, which you have attached, took noise tests from 3 different sites. The first site was immediately south of the proposed location. It was approximately 0.37 miles from the shooting activity. The average decibel level during the shooting activity was 42.9 decibels. Then, in conjunction with just the shooting test, they did a 24-hour test, and during the 24-hour session, the average decibel level was 59.7 decibels over a 24-hour period. At the second site, which is the site that was closest to the closest neighborhood, it was approximately 0.8 miles from the shooting activity. During the shooting test, the average decibel level was 44 decibels, and it was really actually very hard at that site to hear the shooting because there were dogs barking which actually were more like in the 50 decibel range, which you can see on your test that you have attached. During the 24-hour period that they sampled this site for noise, it averaged 59.2 decibels. The third site was almost directly north, approximately a mile from the site, and during the shooting activity, the decibel level was 44 decibels, sorry, and during the 24-hour session, it was 47.6 decibels. Now, to give you some comparison, an average decibel for a residential house is between 60 and 65 decibels. The EPA proposes that average decibels for a neighborhood is 55. So you have something to compare it to. They also did a noise study at the police department site, and the site that they tested was approximately 0.38 miles from the police range. The shooting activity during that test was 41.7 decibels. On a 24-hour period, it was 57.3 decibels. So it obviously falls in line with the test that we did at the proposed location. So now, the general manager authorized the trust engineer, Tim Johnson, to perform a soil condition analysis. So Mr. Johnson is here to present a summary of his report.
Good afternoon. Tim Johnson with Johnson & Associates. As Lisa described, under our trust engineering contract, we were asked to procure the services of a geotechnical lab as well as an environmental testing lab to run specific tests on the subject site. And we hired PSI, Professional Services Industry, and they in turn with Red River Environmental did the, which is a local office, did the environmental testing for us. And what your slide shows is our average pH runs between 6.23 to 7.95. The EPA requirements ask that you be between 6.5 and 8.5. And then the current lead content on this site is 11.13, which is under the 13, which is the EPA requirement as a minimum. And based on the submittals by the applicant, which is the best management practices, if he fulfills achieving those, we believe that the site is suitable for this activity.
Next slide. So in response to the citizens' concerns in relation to noise and sound attenuation, we amended the lease agreement to eliminate the south course, which is closest to the most southern location residence. Mr. Martin has designed a shooting stand that helps to reduce the noise emitted from the stand, which, by the way, none of this was used during the noise test that we conducted. There was no sound attenuation measures taken. He's designed the course to have all the shooting occur in a southerly, easterly, and northeasterly direction away from residential areas, which will also reduce the noise levels. He's also volunteered to have landscape installed near each of his shooting stands, approximately 3 trees at every stand, like 1 inch in diameter. And he has agreed to hours of operation for both the winter and the summer, and keeping it to daylight hours. In relation to the lead contamination, the agreement was amended to require the lessee to adhere to EPA best management practices for lead at outdoor shooting ranges. He has volunteered a lead reclamation program, and he's agreed to annual soil tests and inspections. He's also designed his course for maximum lead reclamation, which typically most of the information you hear on the internet about lead and the problems with lead, courses are not designed to maximize that lead reclamation. This is one of the things that Mr. Martin does because he believes in being a good steward of the environment. He also takes measures to prevent lead migration, and he is required to do so by his agreement, which could include installations of berms or erosion control, those types of measures to prevent lead migration. In relation to the wildlife, there's no shooting over the dry pond. He wasn't even recommending that, so there won't be any lead falling into that dry pond. and he's also volunteered for regular lead reclamation on an annual basis. If the trustees have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
A question is, are you recommending a move in location or keeping location where it is? I got sort of confused, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, too. Actually, based on the resolution that AQUIT adopted in November, we are to relocate him, and this is the site we're proposing.
Okay. Who's going to pay for the relocation?
Well, he will pay to relocate the startup cost, but he'll be reimbursed based on the original terms of his current lease agreement, which is, in his current agreement, it states that if his lease is terminated prior to the expiration of the term, that AQUIT would reimburse him for the capital improvements he's made at the current site.
And how much is that?
At the time that we started these discussions, it was approximately $125,000.
So the citizens of Oklahoma City are going to pay $125,000 to relocate this?
They're reimbursing the
They're going to come out, there will be $125,000 in the hole, is that right?
reimbursement for the capital improvement.
Thank you.
Well, not for the relocation, for the termination of the lease.
I understand,
Okay.
but the only reason that relocating is the release being terminated. So I think there's a, in my mind, there's a little tie there.
Anyone else have any questions? We have a number of people that have signed up to speak. I have some signed up to speak in favor of it, and several more signed up to speak in opposed to it. I don't have them in any particular order. I have them in the order that they were handed to me. So I think the best thing to do would be to take I think the best thing to do is take the people that signed up to speak in opposition first. Then we'll let the people that signed up to speak in favor, and then let the applicant speak at the end. I might add that there's been a lot of discussion in this matter concerning lead, and I personally have gone back and forth on that matter a number of times, and the report I think that we received from the one we commissioned had to do with lead in the soil and lead in the water, and the potential of it migrating into the water, and I think it came out that that's not a serious consideration. The one that troubled me more, though, was one that was not done, and that has to do with, and we didn't ask for it to be done, but it has to do with the impact on wildlife. I've read a number of magazine articles in that regard, and I will say before we start that I will not be able to vote for it if it has lead shot. So if we're not going to, if lead has to, if that's a part of the make or break as far as the applicant's position on it, well then we can stop right now. So I'd like the applicant to just respond to that before he responds to the entire thing.
I'm David Martin, owner of Quail Ridge and the applicant. With that being said, it is not economically feasible to have a shotgun facility do steel only. It's not the industry standard. Number one is we can't even find the amounts that we shoot in steel shot. It's just not made. It's made for waterfowl shooting only. We discussed this at length with you earlier, so you know the terms there, but it would not be worth it for us to spend the money to go in and put in this facility, this new facility, and that, to go inside there and then cut it down to maybe, we don't even know if we could even maybe we'd be reduced 90% of what we make. So it just wouldn't be economically feasible at this time to do that. So that's going to have to be your decision based on the industry standard. We just, I've consulted with Gene Sears and other people from North Carolina, from California, all over, and they just won't make it.
Yeah, I read reams of material, you can see.
Well, I understand that they...
And I am to the point where, and I'm just one vote. There are 4 of us here today. I'm just one vote. We can go through this whole process, but if I'm not sure procedurally if there's a way I can take a vote on just the lead portion of it. But if the majority of the 4 would not vote for it if it has lead, I think we can save a lot of people a lot of time if that's the case. So I don't know. I'm not sure procedurally. I have my lawyer here, though.
There are on the agenda 2 leases. One was the lease that was originally docketed back in January, which was deferred multiple times. And because it was deferred in order to keep track of our records, we have that on the agenda to be either stricken or approved. In addition to that, there is a second lease on the agenda, which is item 5A4, which proposes some additional concessions that Mr. Martin has offered up as part of this process. What you would be asking is whether or not the trust would make a motion or approve an amendment to the lease that's proposed, that Mr. Martin is proposing and has signed, to add a provision that says no lead shot or something of that nature. That would be a vote that you could take to change the item as proposed, and then you could, based upon how that particular vote came out, you could subsequently vote on the lease as amended.
Who put this provision in there, Greg?
This provision, right now, the agreement is proposed by Mr. Martin, as worked on with staff, with Mr. Martin's other concessions in it, is your 5A4. And what Mr. White is asking is...
I understand what Mr. White is asking. Is the applicant saying that he stood up here and said no just a minute ago? Does he say no in the lease as well?
The lease allows for lead shot.
That's what I thought. And so it allows lead shot, not steel shot.
Well, it allows steel shot too. It would allow either. But Mr. White is saying that he would like to restrict it to steel shot, and Mr. Martin is saying that it isn't meant.
That's what I thought. I was confused about who was suggesting what. So I'm sorry.
Okay, so just for the sake of moving this forward, I would move that we modify item 5A4 to restrict, so we can at least have a vote on this, so that we would restrict the ammunition to be only steel shot, or to not allow lead shot. That wasn't very clear. Let me try that one more time. I would like to modify an amendment for item 5A4 that would prohibit the use of lead shot.
Do you have a second? A motion and a second. Is there discussion? I'd like to add a couple comments myself about what I've personally done. I've read all the materials that everybody's sent, and it's a ton of stuff. I've got probably a third of it here in front of me today, and I've read every one of these. I've read every protest. I've read every petition, letters from people in Timbuktu, and protests from people in Godebo and everywhere else. I mean, I've looked at every one of them. And I've looked at the lead thing, and I read our report, and I'm firmly convinced that lead's not a problem for the water side. I am not convinced that it is not a problem for the wildlife side. I've got, I'm in the throes of trying to make up my mind. I get my subscription to National Parks magazine, and there's a full 4 or 5 page article in it talking about the problems with lead with birds. And if I'm going to err on one side or another when it's that, I will err on being cautious. So I would compliment, if we're getting ready to take a vote here, and it's going to be an up and down vote, obviously, or not obviously, it might be 2-2, I guess, but he has been very good to work with, and I appreciate, I met with Mr. Sears, who's probably the best expert in the country about lead reclamation, and I appreciate all that time that's been put into it. And this is very personal to me. Everybody, all the people that have votes here could tell you that I have not talked to any of them about what I want to do. I haven't tried to get them to vote for it or vote against it or vote for lead or against lead. I've tried to just make up my mind so I could live with myself at the end of the day. I am actually would vote for the gun range itself, but not with lead. So if anybody else wants to make a comment, mea culpa or whatever.
I'd like to point out that I don't think I've received as many emails since we shut down Thunder Alley last year. I mean, you guys were voracious in your emails and very professional in your emails. I got to tell you, they weren't personal attacks and such. You were a little redundant in some of your emails, but you know it was they were very high level, and I do appreciate that the level that you both sides kept the arguments on. So.
I have a question, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman. We have a signed lease by Mr. Martin, and here we are, we're changing it without any discussion with Mr. Martin except what he's heard this morning, or this afternoon.
No, he knew before. This is not the first time he heard that.
That we wouldn't approve it if he wouldn't agree?
I've never committed what you do.
I don't understand that, thank you. But the agreement was that you would vote against it if there was lead?
That's right.
And he said he can't do it with, so essentially we're voting against the new lease then.
I would think so.
You would think so, is that what you say?
Well, I mean, I think that'd be the natural outcome. If he would withdraw it if we don't have lead, is from what he just said. Is that fair, Mr. Martin?
Yes, as I stated before, if it's not profitable, it's not worth doing. We can't do it. Lead is an industry standard. Over 1,800 gun ranges outside clay, trap, and skeet ranges throughout the United States, some owned by federal. Clark County, Nevada has their own that's run through the Parks and Recreation. So the industry standard is that they use lead. As far as it being a problem to wildlife, I don't see that personally. Now, I can see it in the wetlands area where ducks that eat in the low, the riverbanks and stuff like that where there's lead alongside. We can go back and forth, and you've heard their side, you've heard my side, that when you're shooting out into an open field that's going to be reclaimed, and the ducks don't come eat the lead out there in the middle, and then the eagles, who's to say? I don't know that. But from my history of being out in Tecumseh and here at the current location, we have baby ducks on the pond right now out there that are striving and living just fine. Hawks flying around there, they coincide with us. There's deer on the sporting clays, turkey, even at the current location on 149th. And we're getting along fine. We don't shoot those animals. They don't come up and bother us. So to answer your question, Councilman Ryan, I can't afford to do it without lead. The people won't come. Like I said, I've talked to serious shooters throughout the United States. Competition shooters won't put steel through their guns. It's not a readily available target load. It's available in really high brass stuff that we don't shoot anyway, but we just cannot do and make it a business that would be profitable.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? The motion is to exclude lead, if I'm paraphrasing, the motion is to exclude lead from the lease. Voting, please. Motion passes 3-1. Again, I want to tell you, Mr. Martin, I have appreciated your cooperation in doing this. I hate it that it didn't work, that it worked out this way, but everybody has to do what they have to do. And I wouldn't be comfortable with myself if I'd have done anything other than this.
We need to vote on the main motion.
Okay. Now we need a motion on the lease, I guess, as amended.
I believe, yes, sir.
Well, wait.
First of all, don't we need to receive the reports?
Let's wait. Would you withdraw your application at this point? Okay. So we need a motion on the lease as amended. So if you vote yes on the lease, you'll be voting to lease the property to Mr. Martin, who doesn't want the lease because it doesn't have lead in it.
So we haven't voted on the first one, on 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, yeah, all right. Okay, we need a motion on to receive the noise survey. Have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to receive the noise survey. Are there questions or comments? Voting, please. Noise survey is received. Next item is we need a motion to receive the soil condition analysis.
So moved.
Motion and a second to receive the soil condition analysis. Is there a question or comments? Voting, please. Soil is accepted. The next item is the amended and restated lease, which...
And this is the agreement, the draft agreement that has been deferred while we
This is the old
pursued.
one.
Yes.
I need a motion to strike item 5A3.
Okay, I'll move to strike A3, but that, just so everybody knows, that isn't the lease that's pertinent here. That's one that's an old one that's not relevant.
Okay. Have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to strike item 5A3. Voting, please. 5A3 is stricken. Next item is the lease as amended. At this point, I hate to vote before we hear from citizens. However, we could hear from you for a long time, and I don't know that's going to change the outcome of this, but I can I'll leave it up to you. I can't decide for you. The first person that's signed up to speak is Kathy Beckman.
Yes, sir. Thank you for allowing me time to speak. I'm Kathy Beckman. I'm the Executive Director of House of Healing, which is a residential home for teen girls. We are a nonprofit organization, and the way we get our funding is through fundraising, corporations, and individuals. So I am here in support of Dave Martin and the Quail Ridge hunting facility. Last year, and I want to talk a little bit about the economical and the social aspect of Quail Ridge. Last year, House of Healing had the opportunity to have a fundraising event at the Quail Ridge Sporting Clays Shoot. We raised a little bit over $17,000, actually $17,571. Those dollars were spent to impact the Oklahoma City community and our teens. And that's part of the impact. The economical impact for Oklahoma City was better than $20,000. That was due in part from the cost of gas for people to drive to the shoot, the cost of airline tickets for some people that flew in for the shoot, the cost of hotels, the cost of food and drink. All of that made an impact into the economics of Oklahoma City. And as I said, I am a nonprofit organization, and I do reach out to the community with a program called the Learn, Serve, Lead program. That is a program where I go to the Western Heights Academy, which is an alternative school for the Western Heights District, and I reach out to the teens there. The Learn is to encourage those kids to stay in school and get their education. The Serve is to do small service projects. The Lead is to help them to understand that they are responsible to step up to the plate and become the next leaders in our community. From that,
I actually had the principal from last year give me some stats to kind of give you a little bit of what a social impact this makes in Oklahoma City. He stated, due in part from this program, the Learn, Serve, Lead program, there was a 50% reduction in dropout rate in the academy last year. That means we have teens that are entering the workforce with an education. There was an 80% reduction in long-term suspension out of the academy. That's due in part from this program. That's less teens out on the street bored and possibly breaking into your homes, okay? We have youth that were on a track to drop out of school that are now in college. We have a young lady that is serving our country in the military of the Air Force. We have kids from this program from this year that's going on to be in the Marines as soon as they graduate. We're talking about a major impact in the youth in our community. So what I would like to say to you is that's a major impact in the social community. And also the fact that you might say that there's other facilities out there where I could have this fundraising event. And yes, that's correct, there are. But the one thing that I want to say about Dave is that he has a heart for these kids and to serve the community, and he gives us a discounted rate, which means that puts more dollars in House of Healing's hands that makes an impact in the lives of these young people. So as you make your decision, I wish that you would consider the impact that just this one fundraising event has made in the lives of these kids. And we will continue to do that by him allowing us the opportunity to have a discounted rate at that facility if you allow him the opportunity to be there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Kelly Rook. I was wondering if I could just make a point of inquiry of the trust at this point. It's my understanding that Mr. Martin will need to indicate his acceptance of the lease as amended in order for this trust to approve it. And there are a lot of people here who came prepared to speak today, and I'm just wondering whether it really is necessary for us to go through all of that if Mr. Martin, as he has indicated, is unwilling to sign the lease as amended. So I'm just asking if that might be an appropriate inquiry to be made of Mr. Martin at this time. Is he willing to sign the lease as amended? And if not, I question whether there's anything for the trust to consider. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. There are a couple more people that have signed up to speak in behalf, or actually 3 more people have signed up to speak in behalf of it. And then there's probably 20 that have signed up to speak in opposition. I think the point that Mr. Work makes is a good one. There's really not a lot of point in staying here another hour and a half if it's a moot point. Mr. Martin, I would ask you, would you need to come back to the microphone. If the lease is passed as amended, would you accept that lease? Would you sign the lease?
And then it still has to go before the city council next week for the special permit. And that would give me a week in order to...
It's on the city council agenda, yes.
So that would give me a week in order to make that decision of whether it's feasible or not, then we could withdraw that. If I withdraw the special permit app, then it wouldn't go through anyway, because it has to be coincided, correct?
True. I think that's right.
Well, right now, we don't have a signed agreement from the applicant. What we have is we had a proposal from the applicant in the form of an agreement signed by one party. We have an agreement that was changed by the trust. So we really don't have anything to put on the council's agenda right now, because we don't have a document that the clerk can put on there that's signed by an applicant in a form that would be possibly approved by the trust.
So that his signature would be what would be necessary for it to go forward,
Correct.
not the approval of the trust.
Well, approval of the trust would be required too. We're working on the assumption that if the trust were to vote and approve the lease as amended, we would then have a document signed by one of three parties. In order to put it on the city council agenda, we would need Mr. Martin's signature so that the city clerk can put it on the city council agenda so that the two of the three parties would be on the document.
So I understand you need one of three signatures on that in order to go forward.
We would need the trust to make a decision whether or not to approve the agreement as amended. We would need your signature stating that you would agree to the lease as amended, assuming the trustees voted that way, and then we would have something to put on the city council agenda.
So you can make your vote without my signature right now
We can make a vote, but it would just be a counter offer. It would not be binding on you because, of course, you have not signed
until I
it.
sign that agreement.
That's correct.
So you can make your vote with the stipulations in there, and then give me time to confer with my, because I just don't know if it can be done.
Are you saying it would not go before the council even if it passes now without a signature?
I think that's what he's, that's what,
I think that's what he said.
I think that's what he's saying.
The council considers contracts, the docket contracts that have been signed by all the other parties. The council signs last.
So we can vote. I appreciate it, but I don't like that idea. We can go ahead and vote. I don't, I have a feeling the vote's going to come out the way it's going to come out to approve the lease with the clause in it that he doesn't like. And if he doesn't sign it, it won't go forward.
Correct.
Is that right?
That's correct. There'd be nothing to docket for the council.
So the question is, do we go through the rest of this today or not? And that's procedural. I can see a trap either way there. I think most of the people are about as worn out with this as I am. And I think I would very much like to bring it to a resolution if I can. We can do that. I mean, that's possible. But
Mr. Chairman, despite the fact that people are still worn out, and I can understand that, we've been through similar items before, but the key is Mr. Martin's signature on the lease agreement. And he wants some time to talk to his whoever. And if we deferred it 2 weeks, it would be a 2-week delay, but at that point in time, we would know whether we had a lease agreement or not, because Mr. Martin rather could sign it or not sign it before our next meeting. That's the only reason that deferral makes any sense at all.
I think, I agree, Councilman, because I think when we vote today to approve it, there are people that object to other provisions in the lease itself that are here today. If we voted to approve it without listening to all that, even though it might be moot eventually, it'd be a waste of time to do it. So maybe the best thing to do is to continue it another 2 weeks.
It'll be
3 weeks. Mr. Work?
You know,
Mr. Work?
Can I just make a comment? You know, we've had a lot of information. I don't think we're a generally bright group of folks up here that we've got a lot of information. We've read your emails back and forth. I've gotten packets of information I've gone through, and I'm, you know, you can make your cases, and this is a public process. We don't want anybody not to feel like they haven't been heard. But I'm not trying to hear anything today that I haven't read already. But of course, we have a public process here, and I want to hear whatever's out there. I know you feel like you've got to make your case, but most of you have already made your case. So you can.
Well, I was going to ask Mr. Work on behalf of his clients, and there's another couple of lawyers here, I think, that represent individual clients. Would they prefer to continue it until there's a resolution on this lead question, or would you want to go ahead today?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. From our standpoint, and I don't represent every one of these people that are here today, and there may be differing views about it, but from our standpoint, we would like to know whether or not Mr. Martin is intending to sign the lease as amended or not. If not, there's no need for us to make this presentation and to carry on this fight. If he does intend to sign the lease as amended and have it go forward to this trust and to the council, then yes, we would like to present our arguments.
I'm not intending to short-circuit individuals that are not represented here, but I think the lawyers probably represent more of you than, so if, I think you're attorney, right? Why don't you come up and tell us your name and address and give us your opinion on what we ought to do.
My name is Perry Kaufman, Your Honor. I represent some of the residents, not all of them either. I'm in the same boat as Kelly is. At this point, the lead issues don't come up. The sound issues are still important to us, and we would like to speak to that if necessary. But I don't see the purpose of the trustees wasting their time if it's not going to be accepted either. Okay. I mean, that doesn't serve anybody's purpose. And, you know, I hate to say, and that's one of the things I was saying earlier, is tabling it is more of a pain, because you guys have been involved in it more than I have.
Right.
And these people have to take off work to be here, which is bad. But at this point, since the lease has been changed and it's not signed, it's not going to the city council next week anyway, what difference does it make?
Okay.
Yeah?
Well, the difference is that if he chooses to go forward, that it'll delay his process for several weeks.
Mike Wolford is here also, right? Represent.
He left.
Yes.
Okay.
He had another engagement.
Okay. Are there any individuals that would like to speak to the question about whether we hear it today or whether we've set it off and see if the lease is going to be signed? That's what I want you to talk about. I don't want to talk about noise or lead or anything. I want to talk about whether or not you object to us voting on it today or not. Okay. I mean, we can do that. I won't short-circuit you on the other questions, but that's what we're kind of talking about right now. Well, hearing nobody else, I think the consensus then is that I would entertain a motion to continue it for 3 weeks. Have a motion and a second to continue it for 3 weeks. Is that?
I move we continue it 3 weeks to the next meeting.
I hate to do this. If you want to speak before we vote, you need to come down here to the front.
I thank you for hearing what I got to say. My name is Charles Bailey. I live just 400 yards to the west of this proposed site. Everything I hear is not what I see. Just like someone saying it's not an issue for the birds. I see the turkeys, I see the geese.
Do you oppose us continuing it for 3 weeks, or do you not oppose that? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I oppose it. I'd like to hear everybody now, and if you won't sign the lease, then let's be done with this. This has been drug out a long time.
You can't have it both ways.
Well, if you're not going to, I'd like you to hear us, but if that's going to bring this thing to an end. But another prolong and give him 3 more weeks, he's had enough time to get he's had this case working for a long time. He shouldn't need any more time. And the Water Trust really shouldn't need any more time. They've been working on this. They've been trying to get him in there for a long time.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? We have a motion and a second to defer the matter for 3 weeks. Voting, please. Matter's deferred.
What's that date, Mr. Chairman?
May 7th. Oh, God, I would rather be shot. The next item on the agenda is item 5, joint resolution with the Lake Atoka Association with an ordinance concerning the restriction of use of vehicles on the Atoka Reservation.
And this has a 20-ton limit on vehicular traffic weights on the Lake Atoka Reservation roads. Essentially a weight limit that is acceptable to the roads that we have at Lake Atoka.
Have a motion? And a second? Have a motion and a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the joint resolution. Voting, please. Joint resolution is approved. Next item is a resolution to receive and approve the Lake Atoka Reservation Association budget for fiscal 2014.
Move approval.
Motion and a second to approve item 5C. Voting, please. Budget's approved. Item 5D, resolution authorizing the extension of a letter of credit with the State Street Bank. A motion and a second to approve item 5D. Voting, please. 5D is approved. Next item is 5E, and it's a couple of matters concerning the progressive water conservation measures that we've talked about, 5E 1 and 2. First one is recommended that to be stricken. Do we have a motion to strike that one?
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second to strike item 5E1. Voting, please. The next item is item 5E2, and that's the revision of their joint resolution.
And this inserts the Ryan provision?
This inserts we're always in mandatory, odd even, unless we get a more strict.
The Ryan provision.
Well, I appreciate this because I think we've got to send a stronger message than if the lake level is such and such, we're going to start to conserve water. We got to start doing it every day. So I appreciate it. We have a motion on the joint resolution.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the joint resolution. Voting, please. It's approved. Next item, item F, joint agreement with the Utilities Trust and Gagliardi and the City of Oklahoma City, or enter into executive session. Do we need executive session? Do not. Do we have a motion on it?
Wiley, it's my understanding this contract is in line of previous executive briefings for the...
That's correct.
...to the council, or for the trust.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 5F1. Second, please. It's approved. We do not need an executive session on the next item. I need a motion to strike.
Second.
Motion to strike item G. Voting, please. Item stricken. Next item from trustees. Any trustees have comments? General managers' reports. Status report on the utilities department.
Mr. Chairman, two things of particular interest are that we continue to sell more new water meters by about 25% than we did this time last year, actually 24%. And lake levels have risen in April as they do. We're at about 62% of capacity in the lakes as a whole. McGee Creek is full. Lake Atoka has gained about 3 feet since this report was developed. So things are better, but it remains a drought. And I think if your friends ask you, please tell them it's been a better spring than it was a winter, but it's still dry.
But Marsh, as we sit here today, McGee Creek is in the flood pool by around a foot.
Yes, it's
And Atoka is now only 10 feet down, so we'll be pumping water from McGee Creek to level that out between McGee Creek and Atoka.
Yes.
Draper, although which was way down, is recovering nicely from the levels of which was our doing on the Draper situation. Hefner is only 3¼ feet from being full at this point in time, which for April 15th isn't terrible, or April 16th. Overholster isn't that much water that it makes that much difference. The problem is Canton. Canton is at a low level, and even with the rains we've had the last couple of weeks, it's only raised a foot or so.
Yes, that's correct, and it's going to be a longer recovery time than the southeastern lakes, which do get more rainfall naturally. So, but things are good. Things were much more comfortable than we were.
Right. The drought, it's still a serious condition. The Canton situation is a serious condition, but we have right now 1.81 years supply of water.
Yep.
Amongst the 6 reservoirs.
Is it just a dramatically less rain in the Canton area than there has been other places? Is that mainly the...
Yes, their average rainfall is 15 to 20 inches a year, and the average rainfall in the southeast is 50 inches a year, and that's directly what we see. We have seen a reduction in the volume produced by the North Canadian over the decades. It sort of is what it is in terms of productivity for us, and it's more noticeable now because the weather is so dry, or has been so dry.
Is there some scientific reason that the North Canadian is not producing water like it once was?
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of work. The report we point to actually is from 1996, in which the USGS suggests that a reduction in groundwater aquifers in the western part of the state are impacting Lake Canton's recovery. What we know is, just as there's an alluvial aquifer between here and Lake Canton that captures some water when we take a release to Lake Hefner, as the water comes down the North Canadian River, there's also an alluvial aquifer upstream of Lake Canton that captures rainwater, and some of that does actually flow into the lake gradually after a rain. It's a little different dynamic than we see in our southeast lakes, where the water runs off quickly and goes directly into the lakes. So it's difficult to quantify the groundwater impacts. I think there has been a scientific comment made, but not the detailed research that you could pinpoint and say, oh, it's exactly this per foot of drawdown in the groundwater aquifer.
Well, do we know now, is there a difference now between what, say, 6 inches of rain north of Canton would produce in Canton today compared to what it would have produced, say, 10 years ago?
If I read that information correctly, yes, it's probably less, slightly less. It's a long-term trend. They looked at 30, 40 years worth of data. It's not an overnight thing. And again, weathers and rainfall patterns are such a significant variable with moisture of soil, it's difficult to put a finger on it and say, 100 million gallons a day of at less pumpage out of the aquifers would make a difference in Lake Canton, for example. That equation doesn't exist for us to help us.
So we don't really have any statistics to tell us that as the aquifer drops, the amount of water that comes down the river diminishes.
Right. There's a study that shows that, but it doesn't tell us, again, if the aquifer rose 5 feet, would things go back to normal necessarily? Those equations
But it is
don't work that
known.
way.
that the Ogallala Aquifer has dropped significantly
Yes.
due to center pivot irrigation in western Kansas and eastern Colorado and, Nebraska and Texas. That's known, and that's a fact, and it's also a fact that there's a decrease in yield in the North Canadian River. And I clearly believe there's a correlation.
Yes.
I just wonder if there's any kind of study that would, other than deductive.
We're talking to USGS about whether there's something more to be gained from additional work. I simply don't know. Our groundwater aquifers are not an expertise that we have in-house, particularly.
But we haven't, or have we taken more water from Kenton, say, in the last 10 years or 15 than we took the 10 or 15 before that?
No, but we took more water from Lake Kenton in the last couple of years, again, because of the drought conditions. And one of the things that changed for us is the drought brought more evaporation from our surface water lakes all around it, at Lake Kenton, at Lake Havner. You got less rain, so less rain fell on the lakes, and you see that in 14 inches less water in each of those lakes.
Okay.
Councilman? Bill Crumsner just thought I thought he did an excellent job on his weekend series on the water issues that was in the Sunday section. I thought it was a very comprehensive and fair report.
I told him that privately, but I would restate it publicly that I thought that was as good of analysis of the situation as I've seen in a long time. It kind of shot right down the middle with regard to where things are and how they got there. Any other comments? Comments from trustees? Any other comments? Citizens to be heard? All the citizens are gone. We're adjourned.